Ashley here with HeartHookHome.com, and today we are going to make one of my new yarn organizers or fanny packs. This is a super cute, super fun, stiff basket pattern that holds up beautifully and keeps all of your crochet supplies handy at the couch or in your fanny pack or on your desk like this little guy will. So let's get started. In order to make a yarn organizer, we are holding 2 strands of cotton together. This is craft cotton from Hirschner's. It is a medium size 100% cotton. You can use any worsted weight cotton you like. This is the linen colorway. I love it. Great for a basket. We're going to hold 2 strands together with the 6.5mm crochet hook. That is what we will use to crochet the body of our basket. When we go to join, or when we go to crochet into the base of the basket here, we will use the 4mm hook and to get into these holes easier. And if you are making pockets to add to the inside of your basket or organizer, you're going to use 1 strand of yarn with the 4mm hook to make those pockets. You will also need a pair of scissors, stitch marker, and a yarn needle. Let's get started. Okay, I've got my yarn double stranded. I'm going to start with a slip knot. Remember to follow along if you're making a different size than I am. I am using the 6.5mm hook to crochet the basket portion. So I'm going to start with a chain of 41 for this size. Now that I have my 41 stitches, I'm going to start doing my single crochets. I'm going to do a single crochet in the back loop only of the second chain from the hook. So this right here, a single crochet. And I'm going to do a single crochet in the back loop only, using both strands of yarn in each stitch or each chain all the way until I get back to the end. When I get to the end, I should have 40 single crochet stitches all worked into the back loop of our chain. Now that you've got your first row completed, I like to kind of stretch it to let those stitches settle, and then we're going to form a circle. So we're going to join it to the first stitch, making sure that it's not twisted around on itself. So find that first stitch. We're going to make a slip stitch to that. And remember, we're always using both strands of yarn. And that is the end of round 1. Now we will weave in this tail later. It'll be fine. Go ahead and do a chain 1, and we're going, before I turn, I like to do it before I turn. We're going to insert our hook into the back loop, or what will be after we turn, the back loop of this stitch and that back loop of the chain from the beginning. So we're going into the current row and the row below. So you've still got 2 parts of a stitch here technically, but it's 2 parts of different rows. So pull up a loop and then finish that single crochet. Now you're going to go into the back loop of the next stitch here and the back loop of that chain here. It is kind of tricky working with 2 strands. Just make sure that you're always getting the 2 strands from that and the 2 strands from that. And finish your single crochet. Back loop, single. Now if you want to, before you get too far, you might want to go ahead and mark with a stitch marker so that you know which is the outside and which is the inside. It can be kind of difficult once you get going with the thermal stitch to tell how many rows you have and which is the right side. I'm just going to mark any one of these stitches so that I know this is the row. This is row 2 that I'm marking. I'm just going to continue going around, and when we get to the end, we will join to that first stitch. So here is our final stitch of round 2. So I'm going to join to the top of the first stitch made. Let's make sure we're not twisted around. Going to join to the top of that first stitch, and sometimes this one can get a little bit small when you're working the thermal stitch in the round. So just join to that small stitch there, slip stitch. I like to pull it a little bit tight so that that slip stitch isn't huge. And now we're going to do the same round over and over and over until it gets as tall as you want it to be. That can be 20 rows, it can be 28 rows, it can be 34 rows. You're going to go and end on an even number, but you're always going to do the chain 1. You're going to go into, and I like to insert my hook before I turn, because now that once you've turned, you've got all these different loops everywhere and it's kind of hard to see. So if you do your chain 1 and then insert your hook into the back of this one, the first, and then the back of that one, then you kind of know when you turn that you're going to be on pace all the way around. So continue doing that round, join and turn with the thermal stitch, just like this, for as many rounds as stated in the pattern or for as tall as you would like it to be. And when we get to that point, we will fasten off with the finishing row together, do our bag or our bottom together, and do the construction. Now, when you get your basket as tall as you would like it to be, this is about as tall as I want mine so that I can set a crochet hook in it, and it's going to be just so I can have a whole collection of my hooks in there, right? So now I'm ready to do my final row around the top of my organizer or fanny pack. So to do that, I'm going to do my chain 1. Now, normally we would go into the back loop of this one and the back loop of this one to start the thermal. We're going to do that, but we're also going to incorporate the first loop or the front loop of the current row. So you are going under all 3 of these loops to make our single crochet. So now I'm going to go into all 3 loops of the next stitch, and in each stitch around to fasten it off. When we get all the way back around, we're going to fasten off using the invisible join. So I'm going to clip my yarn, pull this straight on through. I'll go ahead and weave this in using that invisible join method. So to do that, I do have a dedicated tutorial for that. For this, we're going to go into the first stitch front to back, and then I'm going to hold this down and go into the same stitch that we just finished right here, front to back. And now that kind of looks like a stitch. Let's get this positioned a little bit better. There we go. Pull that, and now it looks like a stitch instead of a big slip stitch and a knot. So I'm going to weave in this end, and then we will be ready to prepare our wooden base for the basket itself. Okay, so here we have the finished portion of our basket. I'm just kind of stretching it a little bit to get it to relax because these thermal stitches are nice and stiff. Isn't that gorgeous? Now, it should line up perfectly, or pretty close to the bottom of your organizer. See this wooden bottom. Look at how nicely that lines up, right? It's going to look so great. So I'm going to leave this off to the side. We're going to prepare our wooden base. So I'm going to use, instead of the 6.5 millimeter that we have been using to crochet the basket, we are going to use the 4 millimeter hook, and we're going to crochet into the holes of our wooden base here. So this wooden base has 30 holes around for this size that I am making. Different sizes obviously have different numbers of holes, so you're going to need to do a different repeat or a different way. You just need to make sure that the number of stitches that you have equals the number of stitches on the basket. So I have 30 holes and I have 40 stitches. So that means that every third stitch, I'm going to do 2 stitches so that I can take this from 30 to 40. So let's do that together. I'm going to attach my yarn in any hole. It does not matter for this size. If you're making a different size, it might matter. So keep that in mind. Follow along with the size that you're making if you're doing the fanny pack or the full-blown organizer on the blog. So I'm going to pull up a loop just like this. I've left myself a little bit of a tail so that I can weave that in later. If you want to, you could crochet around it. Doesn't really matter either way. So I've done my chain 1 and my attaching. I'm ready to do my first stitch. So I'm going to hold my yarn tail up a little bit, and I'm going to do my first single crochet in this hole here. You're going to have to make sure that you hold the hook in a way that gets both of those strands of yarn up through, and then pull that single crochet to finish it off. I'm going to pull my yarn tail to make this beginning look a little bit cleaner. There we go. And now I'm just going to do 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2 all the way around, and that should get me to 40 stitches. Two in this one. And now we'll do 1. This one will be 2. And then we'll do 3. And 4. Beautiful. So I'm going to continue that all the way around, just like we're doing here. When we get back to this, we should have 40 stitches when we get to this final hole. 2 in this final hole. Now when you go to trim or cut your yarn, we are going to join. Look how nice and tidy that is. I'm going to join to the top of the first single crochet that I made right here. And when I go to fasten off, I'm going to make sure that I have a pretty decent tail, because I'm going to use this to sew the basket around the whole thing. So it doesn't need to be super long, just enough to get around that completely sewing it. So go ahead and cut that. I'm going to pull that through my slip stitch here. Okay, now we are ready to use that to sew them to each other. So this is going to be the bottom. As you're looking at it, this is going to be the inside of the basket, right? So this is going to be the outside with the pretty edge that you can actually see. And then we are going to set the basket on top of it and sew stitch for stitch around. Now you should go ahead and weave in this yarn tail here, your beginning yarn tail. If you are making pockets, if you're making an organizer or a fanny pack and you would like to make pockets for yours, I used the 4mm hook and 1 strand of yarn to make different sizes of single crochet rectangles. So I did some that were for a cell phone pocket, I did some that were for stitch markers, I did some that were for one that had a magnet in it. There are multiple different pocket sizes, patterns included with the free pattern, so make whatever size pockets you want for your basket or organizer. If you don't want any any pockets, that's fine. I'm not going to put any on this one. It's literally just a single crochet square that you sew on to the place that you like it to be. Now when you go to sew it on, I do use the whip stitch, and I do have some video of that I will add here for you to show how I sewed those on. So this is my seam here. I'm going to lay this somewhere probably on the edge here so that it's on the side and not just glaringly in the middle of the piece. So I'm going to thread my yarn needle with the tail left over from the wooden base single crochet, the prep row. Pull that just a little bit so that it's not too long. Now I'm going to line up I can remove this at any point. I'm just going to leave it there for now. I've got my yarn tail here, which is pretty much at the corner. So I'm going to find the first stitch here, which is this one. It's that join, so it looks a little wonky. I'm going to go into right there. Nice. All right, so there's that. Now, I'm just going to line this up, and since we have 40 stitches on the basket and we had 40 stitches on this basket bottom, I'm just going to sew stitch for stitch around and around and around and around as I go through. So let's hold this in a way that we can make the most sense of the sewing of it. Okay, so here is my first stitch here. So I'm just going to grab this back bar here. So if I know, actually it would be this one, wouldn't it? So I'm going to always use the same part of the stitch each way around. And it doesn't really matter what part of the stitch that is. You could use this loop here, these two here. You could use the back bar here. You could go through the middle of it if you want to. It doesn't matter. Just try to stay as consistent as possible. I'm going to go into the next one with this back bar. And I'm just going to whip stitch this around the entire bottom. When you get all the way back around, you should have as many stitches open on both sides, so it should end perfectly. Here is our final one here. And then we will just use this tail to weave in, make sure there's no holes. Nice. Now we'll just weave in the end. So here we have our basket. Doesn't that look beautiful? I love it. We've got this beautiful hard bottom. It stands up nice by itself. Might need to stretch the walls just a little bit. We did 40 stitches on the basket and 30 on the wooden base because of the way baskets tend to shrink in as soon as they come up from the bottom. So this way we are combating that with the beautiful wooden base. And I'm going to use mine to hold crochet hooks. So if I put a whole handful of crochet hooks in here, it is rigid enough that it holds it up beautifully. I love this basket. I hope you do too. Remember that if you are sewing on the pockets, you probably want to sew those pockets on before you sew it to the base, just because it is easier to do so. When I did mine, I turned mine inside out, sewed the pockets on, put it back right side, and then did my whip stitch around the bottom here for the base of the basket. Isn't that lovely? I hope you love it. I hope you enjoyed this pattern, and I can't wait to crochet with you again soon. Thanks for watching.